the third class, and we did all the different color studies, and just to try different things having to do with snow. And then we're going to start today talking about the image that we're going to paint, and we're going to do a small color study, and then we'll get started on the actual painting. So this image was from not Pixabay, the other one, Pexel, P-E-X-E-L, I believe. And I cropped it, and then in my photo software I adjusted an area over here because there was a tree I didn't want in the... When I'm looking at an image, if I want to do exactly what my image is, then I start thinking about, okay, what color is that? How do I get close to that? What are the values? What am I going to do first? What would I do second? All of that. So whenever you're doing a watercolor, even if you were wanting to be a little looser with your style, doing a little color study and having some of this information beforehand can really help you when you go to do the painting to not have to think about that kind of stuff and just be a little looser with what you're doing. I don't do a color study for every painting that I do. Sometimes I will just do a little study for maybe the background area, or maybe some part of the painting because maybe I haven't done that thing before. If you do a lot of one type of subject, you start to get an idea of what you need to do in the process, and so you may just need to do a little bit. So I have not told you guys what colors I did for my color study. Where it is? So I've already done a little color study, and I'm going to redraw one just so you can see how I do that right quick, and then we will talk about the colors. And to do my drawing, I'm going to actually draw it extra dark so that it's a little more viewable by anyone that is watching. And this is going to be, maybe 2.5 by 3.5. Sometimes I will do something that's 4 by 6 or 5 by 7. I'll do a larger thing, and it depends on how detailed the subject is, how detailed I want to get. And then I'm basically looking at my image. It's so hard to draw dark. I'm thinking, I need to draw light. So I'm just looking at the different shapes just to give me that quick look of the snow and the river. And then there are some background trees, so I'm just going to sort of indicate that with, oops, I'm not drawing dark enough. Okay, dark. Just a few marks back in here where there would be those background trees. And then because this is a color study, I don't necessarily need to even put in all of these trees. And I'm not going to draw in where all of the foliage is right now. I'm just going to mark the tree trunk to give myself that hint of where those things are. Okay. And there's another one here. And I'm just drawing the line. I'm not drawing the width of the tree trunk right now. Okay, so that gives me enough information that I can go ahead and paint that. I would never draw that dark for my watercolor, as I've told you guys, but so light, I would draw, just very, very little pressure, and that's going to be really hard to see. I don't know if I can even pull that, maybe right there. Yeah, can sort of see it. Okay. So then the next thing would be, pretend I haven't looked at this before, and I need to start kind of giving myself some information. So a lot of snow scenes are on the cold side. You're going to have a lot of blues, maybe some purples, maybe some cooler yellows if there's yellow in there. There's not necessarily going to be some warm in it. And this one has the warmth in it. And one of the things to think about when you're looking at an image is how much of it is warm, how much of it is cool. Is it half of each, which generally is not a good way to go? It's better to have it be 2/3 warm, 1/3 cool, or vice versa, because it makes it more interesting. If it's half cool, half warm, then it can be a little too uniform, I guess. This one has a bright area in it, and some secondary sort of bright areas. And looking, do you guys have, let me turn this around. Do you, so what would you say is the brightest area?
The sun.
The sun.
The right-hand sky,
Yeah.
sun sky.
Yeah. And then when you're looking at, if you have your black and white copy, the yellow that is around the sun can actually sort of trick our eyes and make us think it's brighter than it actually is. So when I printed out the black and white copy, it doesn't show up as much. And part of that is because this is a very vibrant color over here, and then the colors around it are a little more neutral, so you see that more. So that is something to think about when you're looking at the color is it vibrant or is it more neutral? So in general, the most vibrant area of this, well, it is the most vibrant area of this image is right there at the sun mark. And then there is just a touch of that down here on this snow. That is something that you could just leave white if you wanted to, or if you wanted to put just a little bit of that color that's around here, down here. So then I start looking at, okay, what would I make, how would I make that color? What would I do to do that? So do you guys have any thoughts about the color around the sun, what you might use?
Here's a yellow.
I was going to say burnt sienna and maybe ultramarine or phthalo.
So I could see maybe some burnt sienna out here. Yeah, there is some yellow right around.
The yellow, yes.
And Margaret thought hands of yellow, and so that would, I think that's a good suggestion. Any other thoughts on a color for there?
I did a little one just for fun, and I used lemon, but and it worked okay.
Yep.
But I was waiting to see what you were going to do.
Yes.
I want to do another.
Yes, and lemon is another good choice because when you're looking at your colors, let me grab my two. On my palette, I have both cool and warm yellows, and I'm going to put this in the middle. All of the colors we have, in general, for your color wheel, the warmer colors are going to be sort of from here down. Your cooler colors are going to be on this side, except for ignore my browns over there. And within each family, each color family, you have cools and warms in each family. So in the reds, my reds that are over here are warmer than the ones that are over here. And you can also think about it as leaning toward. So these reds lean toward purple or blue. These reds lean toward orange or yellow. And the same thing here, my greens that are over here, I mostly actually have warm greens on my palette. I have one green that is a little cooler. And these are a little out of order right here. And then my blues over here lean toward green. These blues lean toward purple or red as they're going that direction. So when you go to make a mix, that can make a difference. So this little bit of, I handed you guys a handout that says how to mix vibrant colors. We're not going to go into it a whole lot, but I wanted you to have that. And one of the things that's on there is a color wheel that looks sort of like this. This one's not finished. And I just wanted to show you this right quick because there is sort of a new theory on doing color wheels in that you can use a split primary to make the most vibrant colors. So on this one, there's 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. So to make this last part of this color wheel, if you ever want to try a color wheel like this, this is a fun one to create. And I just place water on here. And then I'm going to get out ultramarine and Quin Rose. So my 2 yellows are New Gamboge and Hansa yellow or lemon. And my 2 blues are Phthalo blue and ultramarine. And then the 2 reds are Quin Rose and either Cad Red or Parole Scarlet would be for those. And I'm going to get my other brush to do this one. So this would give you, those mixes would give you vibrant secondary colors in there. And if you, wrong red. if you wanted to make a less vibrant mix, you want it to be a little more neutral, then you could mix a different red with a different blue, or a different yellow with a different blue to get you those less than vibrant mixes. And generally in nature, you're not necessarily going to see this kind of vibrancy. Depends on what you're looking at. Because there are some flowers and some things that will be very vibrant. Okay, oops. I'm not doing what I usually do for this. All right, so for this one, this kind of color wheel, basically you layer or load up one end and start it over just a little bit.
And that's your Quinn Rose?
That's my Quinn Rose. Now that is my red that is leaning toward blue.
Right.
So then when I put my ultramarine on this side, and ultramarine is a blue that's leaning toward red, it will give me, let's see if I can get it really loaded up in there. Okay. And then you take it, and it's going to be hard to show you, except for on the screen maybe. And you start it mixing and running. And I have a lot of water over here and not as much over here. Trying to do this quick. Okay. So fill that in just a little bit. Basically, we're trying to get a purple in between. There we go. That will show you that mix, and so it's just kind of a fun way to get the colors to blend and move and give you basically an optical mix, because they're mixing on the paper. And so you can get a little more vibrant and interesting mixes because they're not maybe completely mixed compared to mixing it completely on your palette. So that is also just a way if you want to have a little more interesting mix too. So then what I would do with this is I would keep watching it. I would want to try to keep pure red over here, pure blue over here, and then get a variety of purple in the middle. And because it's got a lot of water on it right now, I'm just going to kind of soak that up.
So are you saying that mixing color on the paper will give you a vibrant color?
It can.
If you mix on the palette, that's what, okay.
Yes, it can, because you're not brushing it around and mixing the particles completely.
Okay.
You can also sort of do that over here if you have both colors out and you mix, but you don't sit there and mix and mix and mix and mix so that it's completely combined.
Right.
So you can get a little more vibrancy by just not completely mixing together. Then and sometimes you'll get a little colored variety happening that way too, because you may have a little blue left on your brush and a little red in another area or something, so you see it. But yes, you can get a little more vibrancy that way. And then I think you can probably see that these are very vibrant, these are not as vibrant. So these colors were done a different way, like I think we glazed color here and we used some different mixes. This is a way you can lay out color and just start playing with your pigments on your palette. If you haven't done that, it's a really good thing to just try mixes and see what you get. The other color wheels that you can find, and there are a whole host of color wheels. This one is a cool primaries color wheel, this one's a warm primaries color wheel, and there's a variety of color that happens from those. And then there's things like this. Same kind of thing that we did over on this color wheel is just to do a long strip and mix colors that way, and then you can make charts. So I wanted to show you guys that. This, I mean, color theory wise, you can get into a whole lot of information with doing a class, and I need to put that on my list again sometime to do another color theory class.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually kind of fun to do. All right. It's a lot of experimenting and trying things. Okay, so what we are going to do is I am going to pull out some colors, and I think I'll leave, well, I don't know if you'll be able to see it that well there, but first of all, there is sort of an orangey color down in here. So we need to make an orange that is not a really vibrant orange. Okay. What do you see when you look in this area? If you're lavender, yeah. Is it vibrant, more neutral? Okay. Kind of gray, maybe a little bit in this corner. Yeah. And then down in here, you see kind of, yeah, there's a little bit of grays, there's a little bit of yellow down in there. Maybe almost maybe this, but lighter. And then what would you say is down on the snow?
Lavender, gray.
Mm-hmm. Blues, grays. Yep. So there's it's almost like this is separate from this, which it kind of is. You know, I kept trying to maybe use the same colors I was using up here down here, and then it just wasn't quite going to work. For me, these colors are a little more vibrant compared to some of the colors up here. The trees, if I hold one of these, which this is off my printer, so it may not be exactly black, but if you look at the tree compared to the black on here, what can you see anything in that tree color? I mean, initially it kind of looked like, oh, it's black.
Yeah, but it's brown.
It's kind of browny.
Yeah, it's kind of purple too.
Mm-hmm.
I see some pink.
Okay.
My eyes are pink.
No, and so you brought up,
greenish.
Do you?
Greenish black.
well, and you guys brought up something that we don't all see color the same way. So it may be because our eyes have cataracts and we're not seeing it the same. We all have, I think we have different counts of rods and cones. Does that sound? I'm thinking that's what I had researched one point. So even though you know, everybody's doing the same image, we may not see it the same way. So don't feel like just because I say, well, this is what I'm going to use, and you may have another mix you want to try. So when I hold this over that, I see it's kind of more purpley brown. It's
definitely
warmer.
warmer.
Definitely warmer, yes. And so I have to look at that. And then value-wise, real quick before we go on, your darkest dark would be the trees in the foreground, and your lightest light would be where the sun is up at the top. And then there are a few places, like maybe right down here in the water, that are, and maybe a touch on the snow in a couple places. The foreground snow is actually maybe about 30, 40, no, it's about 40% in the shadows, which when you're working with a photo, if it's in color, it can be a little hard to tell. That's pretty close. It's almost in color, it's almost a little darker. So this may not be the same amount of ink on my paper compared to what's on this one. So that can change what you're seeing. And some photos can be dark in the shadow areas. So you may not want to push it as dark as what you're seeing. Sometimes in the shadows, I'll see people paint black when it should have a little bit of something happening in there because it makes it a flat, dead, almost a hole. So be careful when you're seeing a dark color that you don't paint it just flat. Give it a little bit of interest. Okay. So I think a couple of you did a little bit of some playing around with colors. And do you want to throw out some of the colors you used for yours?
I did mine real peachy.
Okay.
And I'll start out by saying, I used opera mixed with...
Interesting. Yeah.
I just love it. Mixed with, let me think, was it... I can't think, but...
For your warm?
Yeah, for my kind of peachy. But I put something else in there to tone it down a little.
Okay.
I think it was a blue.
Okay. And you could, actually probably what I would do if it was real peachy is well, no, blue might work. It would depend on the blue.
bluish.
Yeah, like a purpley blue. You could put a little bit of burnt sienna in that also.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You could, because burnt sienna does a really good job of toning mixes. So if you have a vibrant mix and you want to knock it down a little bit, burnt sienna, just a little bit, you don't need a ton. Or the opposite color can tone things down. PG Colors, what did you use for your trees? Did you?
I used the same that I did on our exercise, the Pyrrole Red and Ultramarine.
Ultramarine,
blue
okay.
Mixed.
Okay, so that, I'll show you guys that mix right quick. So I have my ultramarine out. And for any color that you're trying to go dark with, you want more pigment, less water. It doesn't mean that it should not move on your palette. You still want it to be able to move. You don't want it to be sticky. But you need to get out enough pigment, and so I initially wet my brush and then I just keep going back. I'm not getting more water, I'm just pulling more pigment out as I can get it out and get it off of my brush. When I've cleaned my palette, sometimes my paint doesn't want to attach as well, and some colors will have more of an issue than others. So it just kind of depends on what your palette is wanting to do. Your brush.
Yeah, I just got the, is it Scarlet, the
Pyrrole Scarlet.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure that I was getting what I wanted with my Cad Red.
Okay.
And it was, I do think it's more vibrant.
It is.
Yeah.
Pyrrole is a little more vibrant. It is semi-transparent. Cad Red is now Cad Red hue, unless you have an old version.
Okay.
The hue pigments mean that there is more than one pigment in there to make a color that is as similar as they can get it to the original.
Okay.
The cadmium colors in particular, most of the brands are taking them out of their line because, other than leaving it as a hue, because they're poison.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
poison.
A cadmium color. Yeah.
Don't need it.
But and same with cobalt. Cobalt is a a heavy metal, so you need to be careful with that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be putting your fingers in your paint and all of that. There is a lot of finger paint. We could finger paint. There's a lot of colors, not a lot, but there are some colors that they have made into hues because either they can't get those pigments anymore in its natural form or wherever it's located, or that it's an issue with the paint, and so they have created hues. So I, for a while ago, had changed because also I like transparent rather than opaque, and cadmium colors are more opaque. So this would be the kind of purpley, I'm just going to make a big swatch of it. The purpley dark that you could make, and you can go darker, it just, my watercolor is a little wet right now. So the other thing you can do is if you're trying to get your colors darker is pull your pigment out and let it sit for a few seconds because the moisture level starts to go off into the atmosphere, and then you can usually have a little bit easier time making it darker. So that's your mix. What mix did you make, Margaret?
For which?
For your trees.
For the trees, Alvaro, Fresca.
Okay, so and sap. Okay, so this mix is Alvaro's Fresco Gray, and it's one that I added to my palette recently. And so Margaret was seeing the trees, she wanted to go a little gray or green with her mix. And so that's the gray. And the Alvaro's Fresco is a 3-pigment mix. So you have to be careful with that, knowing because if you mix more than 3 to 4 pigments, whether it's in one tube or a couple, things, you can start to have mud. And sap green is also a 3-pigment paint, so you have to be very careful. However,
I like the color of it.
one of the things about this one is these trees are not vibrant.
No.
These trees are more neutral.
Yeah.
So, it might be that this works, and I actually think I have mixed this in the hummingbird painting I did not too long ago to neutralize the green a little bit.
Can I ask you what gray would be sort of equivalent to the Alvaro?
I don't know that there is a gray that would be equivalent.
Okay.
You could mix something close because I have mixed. I believe I've mixed I think I've mixed my burnt sienna and either ultramarine or cobalt to make a gray, and then added a little bit of either magenta or one of my pinks to give it a little bit of a purpley flavor to it. So you can get close.
It has that little bit of...
Yeah. And I didn't have enough gray out for this. I put too much sap in it. So this would be that deep color. Yeah. So then you could go from there and you could say, okay, do I like either of those? Do I want to play with that or adjust it? The other option possibly for these trees would be to use a ultramarine with a burnt sienna, because then you get a deep kind of brown gray or brown blue. So I'll pull out some burnt sienna with the ultramarine.
That would be a warmer mix.
It would be a warmer mix. Yeah. So this is with the burnt sienna in it, so you could use that.
What was the first color?
This is not as dark as it should be, but ultramarine and the Pebeo Scarlet. And what you also can do, because some of the edges of these trees, because they are getting hit by the sunlight, have warm areas on them. So you might decide, oh, I want to show some of that. So when you come up to do the top of this tree, you might get your main mix and then touch into your warm color so that you get a little more warm on some of those edges, and then it can go into the dark. So when we go to do the trees, we can look at that. Okay, so now big mystery going away. I decided to try indigo, because indigo is a dark color to start with. This is indigo straight. It is really dark. But if you thin it, just so that you can see that, if you don't have indigo, it is sort of a turquoisey blue. And then I was thinking, well, how do I want to adjust that? Because I don't want it to be just indigo on there. So what did I end up using? I ended up using Pebeo Scarlet. So I'm using this this warm red with this kind of a turquoisey black almost. And because those two colors are going to neutralize each other a little bit, you have to be careful. You don't want a ton of the Pebeo Scarlet in the mix. But it will give you, depending on how much, there we go. You can have it be, let me get it a little warmer. You can have it be a little warmer if you want. That's really warm. Or you can go with it kind of a little more on the purpley side of things. So you can go almost black because of how those two mix together, where it can neutralize it very quickly.
Yes.
And if you have it not be even in its mix, then you'll get it a little warmer or a little cooler. So that is another, and that's what I decided to use. If you thin that, same mix, up, let me see if I can get it. If you thin it, you can get the color that's up in that corner. Very pretty quickly.
Is that
Is
granulating?
ultra,
Indigo, is that
Probably.
It's granulating?
Yeah.
is French ultramarine deep sort of an indigo?
No, ultramarine deep is just a little more purple, and it is
Okay.
darker in value. So this, and it is on the redder side. That's ultramarine deep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Prussian, possibly. Prussian might
yeah,
work.
Prussian.
Because Prussian is very similar to indigo. Prussian's a little more turquoisey, I believe, than indigo. But because these are a little more neutral, part of that is because the light is hazy and it's probably clouds in there, so we're not seeing real vibrant colors, and it's sunset. So you're going to get, anytime you have a sunset, that color is going to affect everything else in the image, so that can vary what you're seeing. It's not getting the snow as much, but this is not as vibrant as, say, this color. So we have to be careful when we do this that we're not, you know, making it too vibrant down here. Okay, so I'm going to do this one right quick just to give you a quick idea of what we're going to do in the background. I won't be able to do it all because it has to dry and all of that. So what I ended up doing is, you can, when you have a sun like this, you could put some mask in there. However, when you do that, if your paint moves in a little bit, you can end up with a hard ring. And if you didn't make the mask nice and neat and straight, you can end up with this really weird shape. So it's almost better to just put it in as water and paint around it. So I'm using, let me make sure I put the warm in as, okay. So I'm going to use my Hansa Light, but if you have lemon, you can use lemon. Lemon is a little more on the opaque side, depending on the brand you have. Not all are the same in how they look. So, and that's one of the reasons I switched to the Hansa Light. I liked that better. So, but they're very similar in color. And when you use this, you want to have almost no color on your brush. So that may be where you were thinking yours is a little vibrant. It almost has to be like just barely, you know, barely there, because it will stand out really strongly. And then I have my indigo out and the warm red. I'm going to get just a little more Perol out. And those are my main three colors in my image. Then I used a little bit different down in the snow, and we can talk about that later, but I wanted just to give you an idea of what we're going to do on the sky, and then I'll pull out my big one. So when I'm doing a color study, this would be a very quick way to try to figure out my colors. And so I'm placing water on there, and this also helps me figure out my process. So generally I start with the back. If I can start with the sky or the background, I do that first, and then I work forward. If there's something that I need to mask to protect it, I will have already done that. And then I'm using water, and I will just make a little ring up there, and that will also tell me how much it's moving. If it moves a lot and I lose that center area, that's something where right in the beginning I can go in and dab that up and maybe pull it back without having to try to do much scrubbing back out. Now I'm going to get some of my warm red, which is the Perol Scarlet with the lemon. You could use burnt sienna. It's just maybe not going to be as vibrant. You could use an orange. Just be careful that your orange is not too vibrant, and that might be where you want to put a little bit of some other color with it, like a blue or a purple or a burnt sienna. And there is almost a little bit of pink right in here. So if you want, which I didn't in mine, well, it almost makes a little bit of a purpley pink when I use the indigo and the Perol Scarlet, a little bit. And some of that in there. And then I'm going to use the grayer, that's too dark. The grayer with the indigo on the corner. Now, if you wanted to give it a little more of a pink feel up there, you could put a little bit of a cooler red, like a Quin Rose or something like that up there.
So this is just the pyro, the lemon, and
My indigo.
Indigo.
Yeah. Now, if you didn't have indigo and you wanted to try Prussian, you could do that. You could do one of the earlier mixes that you guys have already explored, or use. You could use the burnt sienna and ultramarine to be your darker color over here. I think, yeah. I kind of feel like this might be good for the trees if you're going with ultramarine, but I almost think I would do the Perol and ultramarine for the sky because it'll go a little more purple. This is not going to go purple. This will go more gray or brown or something like that. So let me grab my actual painting because I think you can see on here, basically what I did was I did the sky first. That had to dry before I could do the trees anywhere in there, so then you could go and do the snow. And for this I just did a really quick, oh, before I go on, sorry, a little skipping around. My water is also that same sky color. So I wet the water area, and there is just a little bit of some lemony color, kind of in that one corner, and then it's peachy in there, and it's almost pink in one area. So once that's in, then I would dry it. And then once it's dry, then I can come in and do some of the snow. And I used ultramarine and my Pearl Scarlet for the snow because that's going to give me a more neutral mix. And I'm using it on the cooler side. So I'm using more blue in the mix, less of the Pearl Scarlet, so that it's kind of a purple. And if I were actually doing this, the water would need to be dry so that if I touch down there, it's not going to move. And so, but this is just to give you a quick idea. So then once that's completely dry, then I would come in with my darker mix and go in and do the trees. Okay, so.
What did you use for the background trees? Is it just more but darker of what you used in the sky? Those really dull trees?
Yeah,
Yes.
back in here. So I used the indigo and the scarlet, and then when we go to do these guys, we're going to, they are lighter. They, you could, if your sky was still semi-damp, let me see if I can do it. I don't know how wet this is or not. You can sometimes go in while it is still damp and put them in because that will help lighten them but also soften their edges.
Right.
And it's starting to dry a little bit too much, so it's not really moving a lot. So when we go to do these, I'll probably separate this out as a separate step. But if you get comfortable and you want to try putting some trees in while your sky, your background sky is still damp, you can try to do it that way too. Because they're lighter, so it will not matter if you just put it right over where your trees will be.
Right.
So then all of the darker trees in front of it will stand out from there. And okay, so I'm going to switch. And we are going to start the actual painting. Yay! So the crowd goes wild, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to clean this off. I always like to, when I start a painting, have, even though I was just playing with the same colors, I'm going to clean off some of this so that I have nice big areas that I can mix. And when you guys go down to do yours, I do have some indigo if anyone wants to try it, but it's not the brand I'm using. So it may be a little different in color, and I can bring some around if you want any. Okay.
Lorraine, do you know what indithrone, what kind of color is that? I think that's what I have on my palette.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't used it. I'd have to look it up and
Less
see.
green, I would
Okay.
say. I
Okay.
like it a lot. But
I
it's-
like it a lot too.
But
Okay.
it's less green.
It's
Okay.
deep. It's almost like midnight.
Ah, okay, so that might be a good one to do
It might.
instead.
I'll
Yeah,
try.
yeah. All right, so I'm going to pull out, I need a little bit of indigo because I'll need it for some of the gray purple that's over there. I won't need as much as I just got out, but that's okay. And then I need my Hansa, and I need my warm red. And I think that's what I'm going to stick with for mine. And generally you should get your yellow out first, and I always do this where I'm having to clean my brush because now I've got lots of color in there, and I will not need that much yellow. Okay.
Did you say you're going to use yellow and Hansa?
I
I mean
am,
lemon and Hansa?
no, I just have the Hansa Light. Yeah,
Okay.
so I'll use that. And then I will get out my Pearl Scarlet. And you will not need a lot for this sky because it is a paler sky. It's not a real deep color. All right. And then I'm going to use, I think I'm actually going to use this one. Sometimes I'll use my bigger flat, but this one likes to leave hairs everywhere. It does hold a lot of water. Actually,
Like my cat.
I used this last night and it is still wet. So it does hold water. So I need to wet this sky, and I'm going to just wet right over where my trees are. And I realized after I got my drawing on here and had it all ready that I put my drawing on the back side of the Arches paper rather than the front side. So it has a little more texture, but it should work fine. We'll see, because I typically will paint on the front side. Okay. So I am wetting down to where those background trees are. So if some of my sky color goes down into there, it's fine. But I want to give myself sort of a line where if my color goes down that far, that it's all right. I don't want to come down to where, in fact I did a little bit right here, where the snow is, because I want to make sure that my snow is nice and clean. Okay, and then this is shiny right now. So I'm going to dry my brush. I could also go with a smaller brush to put the Hansa on. And it is a better idea to stay a little back from where you actually want it to move to in the very beginning, because if you go right where you want it, sometimes it'll move closer, farther in than you want it, if it's really wet. Okay, I'm going to dry my brush, and that will help me control the moisture. And I'm just going to stay back, and I'm going to go right over and around that whole area, ignore the trees. Okay. So now if some of that moves inward, that'll be okay. It'll make my sun a little smaller, but it will still read all right, and it's not moving really fast, so it looks all right. And then this is one where when you get started on something like this, ignore your phone, ignore anything around you in the room. You need to concentrate and just do it. Okay. So I'm putting on some warm. I'm going to stay back. I'm coming right up to where my yellow is, but I don't want to get too close in there. And I'm just sort of pulling it out from there because actually it's drying really fast today. The other day it was drying too slow, and today, wow. Okay. Work with me, come on. Right. There. All right, and then so I'm just kind of going between the Perol Scarlet and some of my lemon to make it a little more muted, yellowy orange. Whoa, a little bit of yellow in there. Okay, that'll work. Because it doesn't matter, sunsets are all a little varied. I can't talk, jeez. All right, and then a little bit of the scarlet. I'm going to pull that over here, and I want to make sort of a purpley gray that is going to go over in this corner and a little bit around this edge as well. And this also may be where you need to get up, because you can see what you're doing, and your arm motion will help it, you'll move with a little more speed. Okay. And that's getting a little darker than I wanted, but it's going to dry lighter too. Now, I am going to pull out my mop brush, because I don't know if it's the back of this paper, but I'm seeing my strokes a little more. And right down here at the bottom, I'm actually going to use a little bit of just clear water so that I can get that bottom edge to lighten. And that'll make it easier when I go to put these guys in, that they don't have to be as dark. Okay, so when you use the mop, you want your paper to start to be a little dry. And if it is too wet, it will just cause a almost a bloom edge, it looks like, because it's pushing the paint. And right now what it is doing is when it's drier and you use this dry, it blends the color together. So if I get over into here where it's a little wetter, it's going to cause an issue. But over in the orange area, and you barely whisk it over the surface. And if I hit this edge, it's going to cause moisture to pull back. There's a hair right there that I can't move right now. Okay, so that's better. So this is definitely going to be a little darker than my color study, but I think it'll be okay once I get, come on, get it to dry just a touch. I don't want to hit it with the dryer because that could dry it too much. Let me see if I can get these guys to, almost looks like clouds in there or something. Okay. And it's got a little bit of a valley right there, so I'm going to see if I can work with this area. If you get a hair, sometimes if you take a teeny tiny brush with just a little bit of water on it and you just try to scoop under it. I think I got it, but I don't know where.
You got it. I saw it.
Okay. All right, and then I think it's getting dry enough, so it's just barely moist, and you have to. I don't know if you can notice, but I'm sort of just going in different directions, and oh, yeah, I caught another. It's coming off of this.
Oh, I hate that.
Okay, so I think I'm going to leave mine, and it's got a little bit of movement to it. The one thing I did notice is where my sun is, I have a little sort of a dash line that is showing, and I will have to see if I can lessen that once, excuse me, once it's dry.
So the pencil is showing, you mean?
Yeah, so you can try using a scrubber, a damp scrubber brush to lift the line just a little bit, or you can try to go in with an eraser, but there is masking fluid on that right now, so it's better for me just to leave it right now, and then I can come back and play with it later. So I have that in, I need to do the water, and then I'll let you guys go do yours, and we will get going on this. So the water, again, is that same thing. I'm going to wet it, and I'm using the same colors. I wonder if the back of the paper is just affecting it. I don't know. Okay. And then this water has layers because my brush has got a little bit of gray on it. The color of the water is a peachy and a little bit of yellow to it, and then there's the tree reflections on top of it. So I am thinking in terms of layers for the water, and I will start with the peachy color, and then later I can come back and do the reflections. And I can re-wet this later if I want to, if I need that, or I can do it hard-edged. And there's barely any yellow, but there's just a touch of more yellow right in this area. And then peach, and I want my peach just a little darker than I'm getting it right now. Okay. Because one, it will dry lighter, and I want it to be there. And if you want to leave a few little openings here and there, if you feel like a little bit of some light areas on there would be okay. All right, and then I'm going to put this back here, and then I'm going to go over and get just a touch of the indigo with my red. I need a little more because it's not blue enough. Okay, so that I can get some of that shadowy kind of look where the snow is. And I may use some of my purple color that I make later in here as well. So I'm not going to fill it in completely, but I'm just going to mostly along the edges and a touch right here. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now, and we will let you guys go work on it. I have dried mine, and then the next step, so generally I'm working from light to dark, and so getting those background trees that are in this lower little section here and I am going to do it wet and wet. So I will place water above where my, oops, there's some yellow in that brush. I don't want yellow on my brush.
So we're doing
no, you're fine.
You may speak.
Yes, because I've actually told everyone that if you have questions, there may be someone else that has a question that's the same. But you're asking about where I'm placing the water, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go probably about an inch above where I want my actual edge to be. Because that gives it room that if it does decide to keep moving, hopefully I won't end up with a hard edge. So it just gives me a little more room to possibly make an error. And then, you got to have that little fudge room, I think. And then I'm just coming down to the bottom of where those trees are with the water. And there, you can't really see some everywhere through there, but it's just easier to put the water on. And then I'll have it if I decide I want it. Okay. And then I'm using the indigo and, oops, it's loud. The indigo and Parole for these trees as well. And I think I'm going to stick with that. I was going to say I might add a little bit of some of my lilac, but I think I'm going to stay with those two colors. Okay, and then I actually am going to use, so I'm imagining, it doesn't quite show it in the photo, but I'm imagining that the sunset is going to cause a little bit more warmth right through here. So I've got sort of my mix that I'm going to use, and I'm going to go over and just load up the tip of my brush with a little more of that Parole Scarlet so that I can come in and just start with maybe even more than that, maybe even just a little bit of the orange. A little bit more warmth right in through here, and then I can go back and get some of the indigo for some of these as I'm coming around. And if it goes over anything back here, it's going to be light enough that my next layers will cover it. And maybe I'll even put a little more of the orange, that's more yellow, there we go, right in through here. As I'm coming to the bottom of this shape, I actually want it to be, and if you look at the photo, it is just a little lighter than the top edge. And I think that adds to the feeling of it being kind of misty and hazy. So if you, as you're bringing your color down in that area, you might just add a little water to it so it's a little paler at the bottom. And then I'm going to go back to my indigo. Okay. And then as I come down to the bottom, just using a little bit of the water. Okay. And just a little bit of variety going back and forth as I'm going across this area so that, just so that it's not all the same color, makes it more interesting. And I feel like there's a little warmth over in this area too. So I'm going to take a little of my Parole and the Hansa and add just a touch right in here too. little dark, and it's drying actually. So if your edges are starting to dry, or if you touch and it starts to move too much, then give yourself a few more seconds if it's moving too much. If it's starting to dry like that, for those edges, I will actually take my water, clear water, and come high above it, and then come and touch it. And that way, it has a place for, I'm basically connecting the two. If you just go right up to that edge and start softening, what you can end up doing is just keep pulling the color out. Whereas if you put the water there and then soften the edge, it has a place for it to soften into. And I'm not seeing any background trees. Let me see. Oh, there might be a little bit in there because it's kind of in front of that shape. So I'll put just a little bit of color in through here, maybe right in there. Okay. And then because this is drying, I know this is probably drying over here, so I'm going to take a little bit more water and re-wet. And it could be where you just wet one section of it and then come and do this other side. Okay. And I'm not worried about these hard edges because those are going to be trees in front that will be hard edged. And now I just have to be careful, dry my brush on the back so that it doesn't move too much. Okay, whoops, that's really pale. Get in there. Okay. And it's, when I'm putting these in, I'm thinking about just mostly the top edges because all of this is just grouped together. So it's more about just giving that top edge kind of the look of the top of a tree. And because they're blurry, they're going to be a little more just not silhouetted, but you know, not really detailed. Okay, so as it comes down, and then I'll just use a little clear water down in here to pull it down. And I think I could put a little bit in here, but I think that's going to have mostly just my other tree trunks in there anyway, so I think I'll leave it at that. And then right quick on the snow up here, I'll do just this little mound right here. So if you go home and you want to keep working on it, then you'll have a thought about how you might want to proceed. For that, I'm going to use my ultramarine and the Parole, the warm red, and make kind of a muted purple. Now it does have a lot of texture in this snow. So you have to decide if you want to put in that texture or if you want to just shadow it and maybe not put as much texture. It may be from wind blowing, causing, or maybe melting and you know, thawing and freezing and stuff. So I have a little bit of my hands out still. I'm trying to decide if I want to put any warmth in there. I might, just because that might give it a little bit of interest. And I'm going to wet this. And I'm trying to stay right on this front edge. I've got a little bit of my color from my water on the edge right here. If that happened for you, you can take a flat brush, as long as it's not a staining color. And I would probably do this before actually putting that other water on, but sometimes just a brush with a little bit of water, a flat brush, and kind of going back and forth, you can wake up that color that's in that area and lift it out of there. So if you got anything in a place you don't want it, I would do this first, and there's a big peachy stripe right there. Okay. And then I'm going to take my ultramarine and a touch of the warm red.
You switched to ultramarine?
Yes, because it's a little more vibrant, a little bluer up here, whereas the indigo is not going to give me the color I want. And I don't know, I think I'd have to do it in 2 passes. If I put some yellow in, well, I'm going to try it. Heck, you know, go for it, right? All right, so I'm putting a very pale little bit of yellow where the sun might be hitting that edge, and maybe just a little tiny bit of my warm red so that there's a little bit of peach in the snow here as well, not just yellow. And I don't want it very bright because I want it to feel like it's just coming from the sunlight that's there. Now at this point, normally I would say I would dry this and then do this next step. So I am probably, you know, pushing it to do it this way, but because I want to try to give a little bit of that texture, I'm going to just go ahead and stay back from my yellow and peach it a little bit. And basically this whole edge here has some color to it. It's not really white. And then, let's see. So my yellow is dry enough now that I'm okay putting a little bit of that purple kind of right on it, and it's not turning green. That's the issue that you have to be careful of. So that would be sort of that first layer, because then there is a shadow here, there may be a few darker places, and so that's just giving it that first tone. This also could have, if you wanted to, which I will not be on mine, but you could put a touch of a turquoisey color in there as well, because I do see a little bit of turquoise in that snow. So it kind of depends on how you want to do it, but I'm trying to keep mine with just a minimal amount of colors. So right now I've used 1, 2, 3, and then added the ultramarine, so that's 4 colors, and that will probably be how I do mine. Do you want me to show you one of the trees? So if you want to continue, I won't do the whole tree, I'll just do a top edge because this is wet down here. So for that, I will go to, this is where I start getting out all my brushes, because depending on the size, you might decide you want to move to a smaller brush. For some of these bigger areas, I might use one of my bigger brushes. I have the Pearl Scarlet out, I have the Indigo that I'm going to use for my trees, and then, like I suggested, up in the, near the sunlight up here, I'm using more of the Pearl Scarlet in the mix so that it's warmer red, and I'm putting it on the side toward the sunlight. So then as I come, I need more Indigo out. As I come toward, for this tree, the right side, I'm going to put more Indigo in the mix so that it makes it feel like the sun is hitting that one side more. And that's pretty dark. I kind of want to go a little more on the purpley side and not as dark with it. And probably what I'm going to do actually for that upper section, because it got a little dark, is just take a little of my water and kind of pull a little bit of that back up. Sometimes some of those softer edges on this side, where it's sunlit, will help it feel like it's glowing. So you can just soften an edge here and there, and that will give it that little bit of a, like the haze that you would see if you were looking toward the sunlight. Okay, and then I'm trying to see my drawing. It's not so easy. Okay. As I'm coming down, just trying to follow those lines. The tree trunks I'm not going to worry about right now, because I can come back and put those in as a darker shape here and there if I want to. And I want that to be redder. And then as I come down and it connects with the other tree, then I would start working with that tree too, where it's a big mass shape. But basically, this is how I would do it. Just keep moving the shape down and follow. If you want to, because I don't know if I kept or if I drew all the openings in, but if you feel like you want to leave more openings than some of the marks that were on the drawing, you can do that as well. And leave a little more. So then, if this were the whole tree, let me dry it and I'll put a trunk in there. Okay, oops, rolling things. All right, and then I would probably come back. I would just not, like this big tree right here, it feels like the trunk goes all the way down. And it's partly because these branches are just sort of blending in. So I would just say when you go to put your trunks in, make sure that you're leaving gaps so that if there's a darker trunk here and there, that will be better than making one big long straight trunk. Okay. All right, so I will stop there. Basically, you have all the different parts. So if you feel like you want to keep going with it, go ahead. But otherwise, we'll keep working on it next week. Okay.
And bring our other photo next week.
Yeah, or if you have, so it's more if you feel like you're going to be done next week early with this painting, like if you get time and you want to work on it and all of that, then just have either your other photo to draw or you could already have it on paper if you feel like you're going to be that far ahead. So, but yeah, I will send out an image in case someone needs it.
Okay.
And then otherwise, yeah, if you just want to keep working on this one next week and then you can start the other one on the next class. So.